1985 was a great year for Sylvester Stallone. In a year where Back to the Future dominated the top box office position, Stallone's two efforts, Rambo 2 and Rocky 4, were hot on its heels, placing second and third that year, cementing Stallone as a highly bankable actor at the height of his powers. The Rocky films have unwittingly pulled off the same feat as Richard Linklater's Boyhood and have become a document of Stallone's life and career for over 50 years, charting his rise from obscurity to the height of fame, creating an immortal Hollywood icon of the American dream.
It really don't matter if I lose this fight. It really don't matter if this guy opens my head either. Because all I want to do is go the distance.
The Rocky franchise started with very humble roots. It was a low-budget, gritty drama with a fairy tale ending that captured the hearts of audiences at the time of its release, and for decades to come. The early sequels, Rocky 2 and 3, continued the template of grounded personal drama that mirrored Stallone's own experiences. Rocky 2 explored his worry around repeating his success and proving it wasn't a fluke, and Rocky 3 explored having to deal with the status and trappings of fame. Rocky 4, however, is a completely different beast. Rocky 3 and 4 see the Italian stallion forced into action out of revenge. In Rocky 3, his trainer and mentor dies, and his victory against Clubber Lang is a way of avenging his death. In Rocky 4, we see Rocky's best friend and new mentor, Apollo Creed, played by Carl Weathers, killed in a brutal fight against a ferocious machine-like villain called Ivan Drago, played by Dolph Lundgren. The death of Apollo motivates Rocky to step into the ring, but this time, his revenge is not just personal. This time, it's war. The title sequence to Rocky 4 tells us everything we need to know. This is a battle of East against West. The story serves as a Cold War parable, pitting the all-American hero of Rocky Balboa against the symbol of Russia's strength and advancement. Drago is the embodiment of the American nightmare at the time. He is larger, stronger, and more powerful than anything America has to stop him. His threatening presence provokes Apollo out of retirement as he challenges Drago to an exhibition fight. Apollo's motivations are interesting. Although on the surface he seems to be driven by a sense of pride and proving that he still has what it takes, it's what Drago symbolizes that's even more threatening. When the story opens, we see both Rocky and Apollo living very luxurious lives. They symbolize all of the spoils that capitalism can offer. There are expensive cars, large homes, jewelry, swimming pools, personal assistants, and even a robot. To Apollo, Drago represents the threat of communism, or at the very least socialism, that in his mind would take all his wealth away if America was to fall into the Soviet way of life.
This is not just an exhibition fight that doesn't mean anything. Look, it's us against them. What are you talking about? Come on. Stallion, maybe you don't know what I'm talking about now, but you will when it's over. Believe me, you will when it's over.
The fight between Apollo and Drago is framed as a war, a battle of nations. Drago is elevated into the ring and witnesses not only an elaborate display of American pageantry, but a declaration of war. Warplanes marked with American and Russian flags collide, and he's swallowed up in the spectacle. This is perhaps the only time he appears vulnerable. He seems perplexed, and in some ways it shows us how sheltered a life he has had behind the Iron Curtain, where decadence and American music is forbidden. He knows nothing about living in America. In the build-up to the fight, we see a magazine cover that publicizes the Apollo-Drago fight. The title reads, Red Star versus Old Glory. These are the names for the Soviet and American flags, respectively. Drago and Apollo are reduced to their nations, and one nation will be defeated.
You will lose.
In the Rocky universe, the character of Apollo Creed has always been the literal embodiment of the American flag and the American dream. In the first Rocky film, he enters the arena dressed as George Washington, one of the founding fathers of America, but when he finally enters the ring, he is dressed in stars and stripes. His iconic boxing trunks that are passed on to Rocky and continue to feature in the Creed franchise are also stars and stripes. and when he enters the arena to fight Drago again, we see him dressed in stars and stripes, embodying Old Glory.
It's showtime! It's showtime!
So, when he's brutally defeated by Drago, we see the death of Old Glory and the death of America.
If he dies, he dies.
It now falls to Rocky to not only avenge Apollo's death, but regain and reassert the power of America. The films of the 80s are renowned and often ridiculed for their montage sequences. The Rocky films are mostly remembered for their motivating training sequences. Arguably, they are the originator of the training montage, the most memorable being when Rocky runs up to the top of the steps and pumps his fists in the air. In Rocky IV, we see the evolution of the montage. The act breaks of the film revolve around 3 key montages, 2 of which are training montages. I say evolution, as the editing in these montages are highly expressive visual sequences that appear to have absorbed the visual language of music videos that were becoming their own established art form in the mid-80s due to the rise of MTV. Stallone uses these montages to great effect to play out the conflict between East and West, but also to bring Rocky from a wealthy pampered champion back to the underdog roots that made Rocky a character we could all identify with. The first montage, set to a song called No Easy Way Out, is almost like a dismantling of Rocky's wealthy persona. The first image we see in the montage is of Rocky's mansion and his Lamborghini driving into the night. As he drives, he works his way through the demons of the present and back into the past, where it all began. He mentally strips himself of all the trappings his successors brought him, back to the streets, back to the meat fridge, and back to basics, back to where it all began. By the end of the montage, he's back to being the underdog, and as he drives through the tunnel, it's a rebirth. The 2 training montages that follow expand on Rocky's notion of going back to basics. Both montages cross-cut Rocky and Drago training for the fight, and the use of match cutting shows dramatic differences between the 2 training methods. Throughout the film, Drago is surrounded by technology as he trains. His training facilities resemble a launch center, so much so that he may as well be part of the Soviet space program. He resembles a machine or a robot. In stark contrast, Rocky has gone back to nature and uses more primitive training methods. There is no science, just hunger, desire, and heart. It feeds into the idea that the Russians are somehow cheating or have an unfair advantage with their technological advancements, as opposed to the honest underdog depiction of Rocky, as we see him grow stronger and stronger through natural means. The final shot of the training montage confirms that Rocky has gone back to his roots. We even hear a few bars of the music from the previous films for the first time as he runs towards the peak of a mountain. Once Rocky reaches the summit, the shot becomes dizzying, working the audience up into a frenzy as he thrusts his fists in the air and yells out Drago's name, a war cry, showing us that he's ready. But it's also a nice callback to running up the steps in the first Rocky film, but this time it's on an epic scale. It's the steps on steroids. As I look back on Rocky IV, 35 years after it was released, something occurred to me. Beyond Stallone channeling the iconic character of his own creation, the iconography of Rocky in this movie feels a lot larger than life and channels a very powerful character in order to defeat the so-called Red Menace, and that is the greatest American hero of all, Superman.
I'm here to fight for truth and justice in the American way.
The final fight between Rocky and Drago takes place in Russia. As we saw in the training montages, Rocky also trains in Russia. His training facilities remind us of Superman's Fortress of Solitude, the place where Superman finds solace away from civilization in an Arctic tundra. For Rocky, the isolation in Russia serves the same purpose.
I gotta leave this place.
So where are you going?
They said they're gonna let me train in Russia. I just wanna go someplace where I ain't gonna think about nothing except him.
In the final fight between Rocky and Drago, it's almost like he's fighting a robot, much in the way that Superman would defeat almost invincible machines. The fight is described as a David versus Goliath matchup, but the turning point comes after Rocky weathers a lot of punishment, but then finally wounds Drago and realizes that Drago is not a machine, but a man after all.
You see, he's not a machine, he's a man!
In contrast, Drago begins to question his own powers and describes Rocky as a piece of iron, but a man of steel might be more fitting. As Rocky starts to win over the crowd through his determination and true grit, Drago begins to be viewed as a national disgrace. At this point, even Drago breaks away from the Soviet doctrine and wants to be an individual, not a propaganda puppet of the state. In the final bloody bout, Rocky seems invincible and ultimately defeats Drago. He's raised up to the rafters and draped in old glory once again. The flag hangs from his shoulders like Superman's cape. His victory has seemed to have moved not only the once hostile crowd, but also the Soviet officials as he brings a message of peace, symbolically bringing an end to the Cold War. He raises the flag and reclaims old glory and creates another American dream. So that's my take on Rocky IV. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want to see more, please hit subscribe. See you next time.